Hello, friends out in crypto land. How is everyone doing on this day? BTC selling continues. So we're going to take a look at the charts today, but today's going to be a little bit different of a stream. I'm going to cover Bitcoin dominance, and I'm also going to talk portfolio strategy. Something I'm going to end up be doing a little bit of a separate video altogether for that. I think it's an important topic, especially with BTC dominance rising, with alts getting hit. And I know not everybody trades. You guys know this channel is very much in the technical analysis and the trading side of things. But, I do have some longer term investments, especially here recently with BTC hitting some historic lows recently at or not 5K, 5,800. Let's call it 6K. And recently. And so some of the hodl play I think is back, especially with potential ETF in the talks and alts, right? That's the story. Alts. What the heck do we do with the alts? They're just getting smashed right now. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about portfolio strategy. So just keep in mind, I'm not going to recommend any specific names or anything like that, but I want to give you guys some ideas on approaches you can take in building your own portfolio strategies. And so that's what I'm going to be covering today. Remember, guys, hit those likes, hit those subscribes if you don't already. If you don't already, my goodness, how can you not subscribe to the Node Investor? Okay, so let's get to it. Thanks for joining, everyone. So very quickly, let's cover the charts first. Let's look at BTC, the selling, what's going on, what levels do we want to look at next, and my thoughts here. And so let's see here. Looking at the comments here, thanks for joining, everybody. At in the buy zone. Hello from Texas. All right. Chain link. All right, cool. Germany in the house. Very cool. All right, so let's take a look at BTC. As you can see, we're hitting a little bit of a low here. We're trying to bounce. At this point, I'm treating it as a bounce. I did take a small position here, and it's mostly intended to be just that, a little bit of a bounce play, a little bit of a scalp trade is all. But if you go to the 1 hour chart here on the RSI, you can see the RSI here hit some pretty low levels here. Same levels we hit yesterday during that quick sell-off. Yesterday's bounce play was much stronger. It hit 1 hour, very quickly sold off, and then just recovered very nicely. But I never saw any follow through, so there was really nothing to do there. And then today here, we're seeing this rollover again and seeing some more selling pressure. Now this is starting to build a little bit of a trend, so it's not looking good from an intermediate basis. I am seeing some oversold conditions in the short term, but going into the next day or so, I'm actually looking for a little bit more downside here. So that's what I'm going to be watching out for. You can see we had this washout low on the 1 hour. On the 4 hour chart, you can see the RSI also hit some pretty good levels down here. The RSI on the 4 hour hit sub 30, right around 28. And the 10 EMA is way up here at 8K. So a bounce would be normal here. But we've seen it before. It could also just sit tight and go sideways, choppy, let the moving average catch up. And so if we're going to continue to see some more downside, those are the two scenarios I'm looking for. A little bit of a bounce or some choppy sideways action, and then another downside move to the bottom. So there was a couple of key levels here I mentioned yesterday. Let me go to the daily chart, and I'll clear the RSI for now. And so there was two key levels to be watching. On the upside, that $8,300 level was just very clear resistance. And so until it really could close above that with any significance, you had to remain cautious. That was very clear resistance. But on the flip side, had we been able to close above that with some good volume, that would have looked very positive. On the other side, right, we were seeing the moving average catch up, start stepping its way higher after this big move. And you got to keep in mind, Bitcoin had a 30% move across, basically less than 2 weeks here on some of this quick action. So it was due for some pause, some consolidation. We've been seeing that here for the last couple of days. Let's moving average is catching up. And this is the first time closing, if we close today below this, could still recover, but this would be the first time closing below the 10 EMA on that daily chart since back here before the strong move started at $6,300. And so that's something going to be significant. I'm not too worried from the bigger sense because we were due. I mean, let's be honest here. We had 2 very strong weeks, big volume. I was looking for maybe a potential red week, a small pause here. If this is going to continue, you just can't generally have that many strong moves in a row. I mean, we've seen it back here, but this is going to be a little bit healthier if we continue to see this stair step in action and move higher. So we were definitely due, but we are looking at a little bit of resistance here. So going back to the daily chart, how low do we go, right? The first level that I was watching is first this support from the last couple of days, which held here around that 7,800 level. Clearly we have broken that, and we were actually sub 7,700 briefly today, but that's the level to be watching here. And on the downside, the big support level that I'm watching is going to be this zone around 7,500, maybe up to 7,600 or so. But this little window right here is going to be a must hold level and would be an ideal place to form a higher low. And so if we continue lower and form a low there, this would be an ideal place to show a little bit of support and bounce action. Doing a Fibonacci analysis on here, looking at this move from the right shoulder of that inverse head and shoulder that broke out to the peak of this move, right around 8,500 basically. You can see that the 382 level lines up pretty well with this little support zone. It's currently sitting at 75.67 or 75.70, depending on how narrow you take these. You can start the fib level from this impulse move higher from here. But at the end of the day, you're basically in that $75 to $7,600 window. And so that would be an ideal place to see it touch, and would make sense if we pulled back that far. Below that, then the next fib level is the 50%. It's not really a fib level, but it's a 50% retracement just below 7,300. And you can see here that was also a significant support zone right around that 7,300. If you remember, we were chopping around before between 73 and 75. And then below that, if we fully retrace to the 618, you'd be basically at 7K. And so even if it went back that far, would not be the end of the world. This would just set up a higher weekly low and a higher daily low, and could set up another strong move. So there's a couple of levels to be watching. First level that I'm watching here in the next couple of days, do we hold above that? If we see it dip to 7,500 or so, I mean, depending on how the 4-hour RSI looks and all that, I'll be taking a look at some potential entries there, and probably in the alts, to be honest with you, if we dip that far. And so that's what I'm going to be looking at. But bigger picture, these are some of the levels to keep an eye on. If it hits 7,000, everyone's going to freak out. It may be the end of the world, but this would be a great place for it to make a higher low, fully retrace some of this move, take some of the euphoria off, and then maybe set up another leg higher. So that's what I'm looking at on BTC here. On the short side, if you want to be a little bit more aggressive in shorting, I think that would be okay if it breaks this 382. And so you would basically take the opposite approach, where you short into bounces. Don't short when it breaks down, because at that point you're probably too late. And so if you're looking at shorting, the way you do that is you wait for these things to bounce, let this moving average catch up, and then you short when it signals that it's going to resume the downtrend, and that's where you take your short and you put your stop just above the swing high. And so that's another strategy to be looking at here, but that's a little bit more aggressive, maybe a little bit more advanced, higher risk. So I know everyone's kind of at a different ways of doing it. Some people don't care about that; they're just looking for a place to accumulate. Other people are looking for maybe some shorter term trading, intermediate, swing trading. We got all kinds of folks here. So that's the levels to be looking at here near term. I did take a little bit of a bounce trade on this. Let's see how it plays out during the course of this stream. I'm looking at a small profit here so far, but it's a small trade, so I'm not going to be really too concerned one way or the other, to be honest with you guys. And so, okay, let's go to BTC dominance, because that's really what I want to talk about here in the near term. So looking at the BTC dominance, you can see we're over 48%. And absolutely a lot of that has come on the back of ETF talk again, the excitement around that. People are swapping out of alts, especially considering, when this run on the BTC dominance started, this was basically in May where it bottomed out, and many of the alts after consensus going into May really started to take a hit. And so here we are in July, and going into July, the ETF talk started to really pick up. And so you're thinking, okay, the alts are already down 40%, 50% versus BTC. And if there's an ETF coming, I mean, then the alts just really took a smackdown at that point. So you saw a further leg down. So that's what you're looking at here. But we're seeing this thing rise. And the question is, how high could it go, right? How much further can the BTC dominance go? How much further can the alts drop versus Bitcoin? And you gotta consider that ETF news is significant if it plays out, because even though the alts are beaten up versus BTC, if there's any probability greater than like 60% that the ETF is going to happen, absolutely people are going to want to be positioned heavy in BTC versus alts, because once that news hits, you can see a quick spike. But I'm also thinking you might see one of these sell the news scenarios. So BTC would quickly have that big spike, but then that may be the opportunity to swap out. If the Bitcoin ETF continues to just lag, maybe fizzles out in terms of the excitement level, then the other thing to keep an eye on is you're going to see a little bit counter trend bounce on the alts. And so that's what I'm looking at here. And so I put a little annotated chart together here for us, just to kind of give you not an expectation, a reference in terms of how big the prior runs have been. And so you can see here in late August, early September, the BTC dominance was around 45%. And then we saw about a 40% increase going into November. And for those of you guys that were trading back here, you remember September and October were just one of those months where you didn't have to do anything but hold BTC because the alts were just choppy and lagging. And you look back at the end of October thinking the only thing to do was buy Bitcoin. And so you had that pretty big run. You had a 40% increase in dominance. And then we had this choppy action, this big spike. CME futures, if you guys remember, launched on December 17th. This prior little spike back here, that's the CBOE futures on December 10th. And then after that, the BTC dominance started to drop. We saw the alts, we saw the big rotation in the alts. And so BTC dominance bottomed out around 33% here in early January. And then during the big sell-off, once everything topped, you saw Bitcoin dominance rising, a little bit of a flight to safety, if you will, even though everything went down. But that was about a 36% increase during that little run from January to March. And then we saw another big alt run going into May. And then Bitcoin dominance bottomed around 36% here in early May. This is when basically the crypto market cap topped as well. And since then, we've seen the increase go to 48%. And to date, that's about a 33% rise in the dominance number. And so lining up to these past two peaks, you can see we're approaching that window, right? So 50% would get us right there. And so you can see the Bitcoin dominance rise to about 50%, maybe a little bit more. But that's what I'm looking for here. So we're getting close is what I'm saying here, basically. Now, could you see a quick spike just like you saw back here? Sure. But from a time perspective, I think we're getting close. And so I'd be looking for that BTC dominance to start peaking out here in August. And that's what I'm going to be paying attention to. Some of these alts, as they're really starting to get beat up versus BTC, are starting to look really attractive here at these levels. Now, I'm still very heavy BTC in terms of my HODL account. It started the month of June, July at around 60%. And I was mostly big cap names for the other stuff. But by the end of July here, I'm sitting at around 80% in terms of my BTC dominance on my HODL account. And you can see that's just a reflection of the alts getting smacked. But I'm so heavy BTC now, I'm thinking maybe time to rotate some of that BTC gain and move into some of these alts. And so how would I do that? So before I go into the charts, I know we all want to look at charts here. Bitcoin at $7,777.70. 77 cents looks like a pretty good buy. But before we go into that, I'm going to certainly cover the charts. I'll take some names. I see you guys already throwing out some names there, and we will absolutely get to that. But I want to stay on this thread of crypto portfolio, and I'm going to do a separate video. I'm actually going to cover this in a newsletter that's coming out maybe tonight, probably tomorrow morning. But I'm going to try to wrap that up here today. But I'm going to be covering this a little bit more, and I'll also do a separate video on this. But I want to quickly touch on portfolio strategy and how you manage all of this. As you guys know, and I've been very clear about this, I am as bullish and positive as I am on the overall crypto market space. Those of you that have been following me for a long time know that there is very little in terms of names that I would hodl forever. And you guys know that I'm very active. I manage my portfolio frequently. I don't take the 5-year view, none at all, right? People are like, hey, this is a long-term thing. You know, you got to buy and you got to hold for 5 years. And I absolutely disagree with that notion, with the exception of like maybe absolutely Bitcoin, with the exception of Bitcoin and maybe Ethereum or something big like that. But I totally disagree with the notion of you got to buy these coins and you got to hold them for 5 years. It's a long-term game, 2 years, whatever. And that's because you got to treat this space very much like you're investing in startups and projects that were great 3 years ago may not exist tomorrow because there's competition, there's advances in the technology, there is so much change. This space is just so young that you have to treat it from that perspective. Okay, so I like alts. I invest in alts, but I am very active. And I always have a point in time or a point in price where I say, hey, if this alt drops below a certain price or a certain level, forget it. I'm done. I'll move back into BTC, right? And so that's the approach I take. With that being said, let's look at some of the strategies that you can take. And so here is my approach to taking strategies. And keep in mind, none of this is like I'm going to hold this forever. I mean, this is fluid. This changes. And so the first thing you want to look at is here in the middle chart, the green chart. And so of the capital that you allocate for crypto investments, whatever that number is, right? It could be, 100% of your net worth. It could be 10% of your net worth, whatever that number is. Of that number, how much is sitting in cash and how much is fully invested, right? And so that will change depending on the market conditions. And so let me quickly go back to the BTC chart, right? And so back here, when Bitcoin is doing one of these guys and the whole market's doing that, your number or my number is 100%. Absolutely, you're just 100% invested, if not adding, right? When it's doing one of these guys and you think it's topping out, then you raise cash and you wait for bottoms to start accumulating and moving some of that cash back in, because at that point you're gaining BTC value, right? And so absolutely, guys, if you're up thousands of percents, hundreds of percents, and you're going parabolic, yes, you got to take some off the table. Absolutely. Isn't that the whole reason you invested in the first place? And so keep that in mind, right? And so that's strategy one, is what's your cash versus crypto for what you've already allocated. And so you reallocate some of that. Now me, I'm basically close to 100% now from what I initially was. Not quite, but I'm getting there. And that's because we're starting to hit some lows. And, at this point, buying back in, you've got way more net BTC than you did in January. So that's one approach. The next approach is the chart on the left. You have to decide this first before you figure out which alt you want to buy. You got to decide, okay, of my crypto portfolio, how much BTC do I want in that? And for me, it's always the single largest name in my portfolio. And so that could be 20%, that could be 30%, that could be 80%. You got to decide what number of that should you buy and what should your portfolio dominance be. And so I kind of have a minimum. 25% is kind of my minimum at this point. Right now, currently, it's very high. It's like flipped around like this. It's like almost 80% BTC and small percent alts. And so that's step two. So step one is how much cash do you raise? Step two is how much BTC in your portfolio do you want? And then step three is what does your portfolio look like in terms of the categories, the sectors of crypto, right? And this doesn't have to be, this could be whatever you want it to be, right? This is just as an example. So you can say, hey, I'm going to be 33% currency, platforms, maybe some exchange coins, some privacy coins. I'm going to be 10% ICOs, like, it could be whatever mix you want, but have a target and try to stick to an ideal target, right? What tends to happen is people maybe will get way too heavy in one sector or the other, and they may say, oh man, my portfolio is like, 80% platform plays. Maybe I should diversify a little bit and put some in this kind of category or that kind of category, right? And so that's how you do it. Here's one allocation that I'm working towards here. Obviously, I'm not here yet because I'm so heavy BTC, but this is what I'm looking at. My two biggest categories are currencies, which that's predominantly BTC plus some other small names, and platforms. Those are by far the largest categories in terms of what I like from a crypto investment perspective. And so platforms, as you know, would be things like Ethereum, Cardano, ICX, Neo, all those type of names. Currencies, that's self-explanatory. And then you have other names like supply chain names. This is BV Chain, Walton. You have payment names like Nano. You've got IoT names like IOTA. You've got exchange names like Binance and KuCoin shares and 0x. And so there's different mixes that you can do. This is my personal way, right? But you guys can mix it up however you want. But my two big categories by far are platforms and currencies is predominantly Bitcoin, but it could include other things. It could include Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, Dash. It could do Zcash, Monero, right? Currencies could be a lot of names, and there's certainly subsectors. And so I'm going to end it there, guys. Just wanted to talk very quickly portfolio strategy. I'll be sharing more of this because I think as the market begins to find some lows, this is going to be important again. Very much we've been in a trade and protect capital mentality for most of the first half of the year. Now it's kind of looking like, hey, maybe we should take some positions, at least for me personally. And so that's what I'm looking at here. But just wanted to share some thoughts about strategy. As I said, I will expand on this, make a separate video, and it's going to be covered a little bit in my newsletter that's coming out probably tomorrow as well. So that's all right. Before we get to the charts, very quickly, very short commercial break. I try not to keep ads and make you click through stuff here, but I got to do some very quick stuff here. Nodeinsiders.com alerts is a proprietary alert system that we've developed. This is kind of in beta mode. It's working, but we are adding stuff as we speak. One of the benefits that will come with this is any training material that I roll out, my current training videos, my new cryptocurrency trading course that's coming out, they will all be included here. There'll be a training tab, so you'll have access to those. And you can also scan these charts. And if, for those of you that don't know, Node Insiders is a private group. So if you're learning how to trade, or if you want to learn more, if you have the basics of TA down, but you're looking for kind of the next level up, check this out at nodeinvestor.com. I've got more information there. And it's a private group. I do keep it limited in terms of the number of openings every month. First time you sign up, it is $200. After that, though, the renewing members always get a discount significantly lower than that. And so if you want to learn more about that, go to nodeinvestor.com. All right, enough of that. Let me close these out and we will get to the charts. I'm going to close out these portfolio tabs. And all right, so let's take a look at the charts here, looking at BTC. For those of you that are just joining here, very quickly, I will cover the levels that I'm looking at here. On the downside, the big support level to be watching is this window between 7,500 and 7,600 in terms of support to be watching on BTC. That's assuming we don't just reverse from here and go higher. But right now, the momentum is certainly to the downside. You can see the RSI on the daily is still pulling in a little bit here. And the 75.50 or so is going to be the 382 retracement level on the Fibonacci level, which lines up well with this prior base that was forming here. So that'll be interesting to watch. Below that, the 50% retracement puts you right at 7,300, which was also a significant price point. That was the support zone here during this base formation. And then below that, 7K psychological number, also the 618 retracement level on the fib side of things. But let's take a look at some of these alts that are getting smashed. So I'm going to do BTC comparative charts for now, just to kind of give you guys the idea here. And so let's start with some of the big names here. Looking at Ethereum first. Where's my ETH here? Ethereum BTC. And so this is the daily chart. You can see here, big picture. We have, let me close these guys out. The lows that we saw in April there, we're basically at, right? We're approaching the same key level here. We're basically right at there. So it's going to be interesting. Do we form a big support zone here? We're testing it again. Does it hold this time? And if you look at the RSI levels here, during this sell-off, the RSI bottomed out. Let me open my number up here. What was that here? That was at basically 17 RSI on the daily before it went flat. And then we saw Ethereum have a pretty strong run versus Bitcoin here over the subsequent weeks. It went up 50% versus BTC. And here we are on the daily again. RSI is at 22. So not quite as low as it was there in April. So there's still potential that we continue to wash out and go lower here on the RSI. Next level down is going to be basically around this support zone right here. But the thing to note is when they have these reversals, it's generally very quick and very strong. I'll show you another example here on EOS here in a sec. But what I want to note is what you want to look for here when you start to see these extremes being hit. You don't want to guess, right? Because you could have just as easily said, hey, this is the low, that's the low, that's the low. Okay, reverse, that's the low, that's the low, right? And you're, basically guessing where the low is, and you're down another 12, 15%, right? Unless you're looking at a longer time horizon. If your time horizon's longer, then you'll probably be okay. But hey, I'm not going to give you guys financial investment advice. I'm just kind of showing you what I would look for here. And I always look for these reversals. Does that mean you miss the exact low? Yes, usually, but that's okay because your timing is a little bit better at that point, and you can start to at least feel a little bit more comfortable in trade. But I mean, so there's one thing, RSI hitting these low 20s is kind of your first clue. If you see climactic volume, selling volume, so if you have a big washout and volume just really spikes, that's kind of everybody throwing in the towel at that point. Those are usually signs that, hey, we're hitting a low. And then the other thing, and EOS showed a good reversal of that here during the last cycle. But the other thing to look for are these massive reversals, right? I mean, if you see that off of an extreme low, most of the time, like that's it, that's your signal. And so you saw two attempts here, right? You had this big washout low where prices went down in a single day about 12%, and then they rallied higher to close almost flat. Well, if you go from the day before, prices went down 15%, and then they rallied higher and they were only down 3%. So when you see a massive drop that just gets bought up very quickly on high volume, you can see on this day, this was the highest volume day for months, or for at least 2 months, right? So this was the highest volume selling day. It was at the lows. The RSI hit this extreme low at 20. And so when you see that, that's kind of your early signal. And then look at the next day. The next day was this massive, what was that, a 30% move? 27% move in one day on even higher volume, right? And this single day just erased 2 weeks of bearish action, right? And so that was a massive reversal. And that led, you're probably thinking, okay, it just went up 25%. I totally missed the boat. The next day it's down a little bit, still holding the moving average. If you would have picked it up at that point, this led to a 240% run over the next month, right? And so not saying that happens every time. This is just a very good example to kind of show you those extremes. And we know EOS had some news with it, the blockchain going live and all that stuff, but this was a massive move that basically took it from one extreme RSI to the other. But the signal was there, right? The massive reversal signal. And so that's what I'm going to start looking out for. I'm looking out for these washed out moves. I'm looking out for these big reversals. Now, keep in mind, this is EOS versus BTC. And so a lot of these alts are starting to hit these extreme lows. And I'm wondering, do they make that same move? Just to keep showing some examples, IOTA during that same time period showed some potential reversals as well. So here is March, and IOTA was one of the early ones to start moving here. And you can see IOTA hit RSI on the daily right around that 25 mark. and then we had some pretty good volume come in. This thing went up about 30% in 4 days. Then it pulled back, and it gave you a double bottom entry. Look at the second low was almost the exact same place. Then it bottomed here, and from there, IOTA had about an 84%. If you go peak to peak, 97%, but about an 80 to 90% run in the subsequent 2 weeks following that nice double bottom reversal versus BTC. And then, of course, it gave it all back up, right? So another lesson of, hey, maybe bank some of that, take some profits. Icon was another example. If you go to ICX during the March-April low, look at this massive reversal candle here, this big hammer bottom. We opened up here. We dropped. Let me go here real quick. And this was March 17th and 18th here. So we dropped about 14%. And we ended up closing up about 2%. The next day was a massive move. And in 4 days, this thing went up 90%. And then you had the big pullback. And then you had another 70, 89%, 70, 80% move there on Icon. And since then, just very ugly, very washed out low. But here we are hitting these historic lows again. And so this is just something to keep an eye on, right? And so I mentioned this because I call it maybe HODL account, maybe switching out, right? And that means I'm not trading it on the hourly charts. I'm looking at more daily charts. But, you know, if all that means that I hold a name for 2 weeks or a month and then switch back to BTC, I'm okay with that, because if I do that and I gain 60, 70, 80% more BTC value and switch back, even if Bitcoin drops 30%, right, I have 70% more BTC. Like, who cares? And so that's the approach I'm taking. And so that's me. I've got a higher risk propensity than a lot of people, but that's okay. But you got to wait, right, is what I'm trying to say here. I'm trying to wait for some of these. And so with that being said, let's take a look at some of these charts. But you can see some of these names are just kind of really falling off a cliff. I mean, this has been a brutal downturn for so many of these alts. You go from end to end here and basically down 72% versus Bitcoin since May. And so let's look at some of the other big cap names. So we go to Bitcoin Cash. And yes, it's an alt. No, I don't believe it's Bitcoin. Sorry if I offended you. So going to Bitcoin Cash, down 45% versus BTC here. Hold on here. Getting an alert on Bitcoin. Let me go back here because I am managing a small trade on this guy right now, and posting that for the group earlier. We'll go back to Bitcoin Cash here. When I know when, geesh, when. So on the upside on this little pop I was looking at is about 74, 78 up to around 79. So volume is starting to wane on this here a little bit. Well, we just started a new hourly candle, so no big deal. All right, I'll just keep an eye on that here. BCH. So going back to this guy here, I'm going to zoom out on the daily charts. You can see we've had this big drop, but this is also forming a falling wedge pattern, right? And so you look at this type of stuff here is what I'm looking at. You can see there, right? The downside is dropping, but it's starting to narrow a little bit. We're starting to ride the lower end of that channel here. And so as this approaches these lower ends, I'm looking at this RSI. And so there's a couple of ways to look at that. I mean, the way you play this pattern is, one, you wait for a break of the upper trend line, right? So that would be a pretty significant move. Or you look for those quick reversals off the lows, which I would rather do. So if in this zone right here, I see one of those big reversal candles on high volume and maybe it ends green for the day type of action, or a big engulfing candle, I may not necessarily wait for it to break that upper trend line before I start to say that's probably a pretty good low to take a look at, right? Stuff like that is what I'm looking at, right? Something like along those lines. And so Bitcoin Cash is certainly setting up there. Looking at Ripple's getting a pretty good hit there. Ripple's trying to do a little bit of a reversal candle here, also forming a small double bottom on the daily chart. We'll look at the tether pair right now. It's not looking too hot from that perspective. But versus BTC, you can see there's an attempt to form a little bit of a low here, a little bit of a double bottom here on this price point here versus BTC. And you can see the RSI is starting to diverge a little bit and move higher. And so this is a pretty good example of if it can break above this little zone here that it's recently been trading above, especially on this current candle, if the volume is above average, that'll be a pretty good sign that, hey, maybe it's due for a little bit of a counter trend rally. So Ripple showing up a little bit double bottom there. Some other names here. Let me go to the charts here. So we covered ETH, we covered Ripple, Bitcoin Cash, EOS. Looking at Stellar, still holding at number 6. Stellar BTC, and keep in mind, this is one of the Coinbase 5 and one of the names that is on deck for potentially being added. And it's currently trying to form a little bit of a reversal candle here versus BTC here. You got this big sell-off that's showing up. Volume looks like it's going to probably come in at least the high of yesterday, if not a little higher there. We got plenty of time left on this current daily bar. And so that's going to be interesting to watch. Do we form here? You can see this was forming a nice double top here versus BTC. And this broke the neckline, but could be a fake out, right? That could be a potential fake out here. And if it closes higher, if it closes above yesterday's high on this would be a big bullish engulfing candle. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I don't expect it'll go that much higher, but if it did, that'd be very positive there. That's another 3% or so versus BTC. And so Stellar looking pretty interesting there. But this one has already found a little bit of a low versus Bitcoin, largely on the news of Coinbase. So you guys remember on the 13th here, that was the Coinbase announcement that they were going to be looking at adding a few names, Stellar Lumens being one of them. And then there was some subsequent news with IBM and some stablecoin news related to the platform on Stellar. And so that has helped to drive some of that outperformance versus Bitcoin. But you can see here the last week or so, it's been very choppy, just kind of consolidating. We'll see if that forms a higher low on Stellar. Litecoin lagging Bitcoin here big time. And so Litecoin since May down about 45% versus BTC. So has certainly not kept up and absolutely not outperformed, but it is a little bit washed out here. RSI is hitting these lows, sub 20 again, but no signs of a reversal just yet. It looked like it was trying right here. There was a little bit of an attempt for a big reversal. But the other thing to keep an eye on too that I watch, you guys know I like the 10 EMA. It's kind of a shorter term indicator, but if you get a big reversal that closes above the 10 EMA, that's much more positive than if you get a big reversal that's still below the 10 EMA. To me, that just tells me it's just a bounce from oversold conditions and there's no confirmation yet. So, and you can see here on this couple days later, there was an attempt and it came right back in and we saw the pullback. So that's the thing to be looking at. But Litecoin, man, getting smacked there. Let's see here. I'm going to skip through a few of these. We covered IOTA here, Cardano. Let's go to Tron, and then I'll go Neo. Man, Neo was sub $30 again today. Briefly, but it was. So looking at Tron here, I'm going to close out this line. I was watching this broader rising trend, which broke, obviously. But it's trying here to form another. This is similar to what did we just look at that had this? Oh, Stellar. No, not Stellar. What had that double bottom? Was that Bcash or Ripple? It was Ripple. Ripple. And so you can see Tron is trying to form a little bit of a second low here. And so it'd be interesting to see if that holds there. Confirmation on these guys would be if they can get above this recent high. You had this swing high attempt here a couple of days ago, pulled right back in. If it makes a higher low here and closes above that, then this will be a pretty decent little double bottom there. And that'll also get it back above the 10 EMA on the daily following these big reversal here at the low here off of this RSI. What was that at? 23 RSI on Tron. But with a lot of these names, right, I mean, you always want to buy names that are stronger. These names are going to face a lot of hurdles, right? That's going to be first resistance on the way up. And, there's going to be so many hurdles along the way up in terms of resistance levels with so many of these names. And that's the drawback to playing these big counter trend rallies. Unless there's massive volume, I mean, these are all going to be hurdles along the way. Doesn't mean they don't overcome them. And if you do some, fib targets and on the retracements and stuff like that, you can always use that to see where some of those levels line up. And you can see the 382 level here lines up pretty well with this third line I got up there. So that would be kind of a first target on a bounce for me. And at that point, that's really all they're looking at is bounces, right? I mean, you're so far away from the prior highs that you got to treat it as a bounce until otherwise, right? I'm not expecting any of these names to just fully retrace and blow right through the highs. I mean, they could, but no one's expecting that right now. All right, so looking at Neo, and then I will stop there and skip through and take some of your names. So looking at Neo BTC here, and you can see Neo during this drop still diverging on the RSI a little bit here, but still hasn't confirmed that it's done. There was a pretty good attempt here about 5-6 days ago. You can see there was this big reversal candle, didn't get above the 10 EMA. Here we are trying to form a higher low. So as long as the low of that holds, if we can finally confirm and get above this, what is that, 43.23 or so, that would be positive. But right now, it just looks like it's a bounce so far. But I'm watching this here. The RSI is diverging. You can see Neo on the dollar pair did hit sub 30 again earlier today. It was at 29.50. And so Neo's sub 30 again. Poor Neo's just getting smacked here. Real quick, OMG, I talked about this in my video yesterday. It did break below that that declining wedge that I was watching here. You can see that declining triangle here, lower highs, and broke below. Now we'll see if that was just a quick fake out and we recover, or if that's another leg down. But right now it's not looking too good for OMG. All right, so let me get over here and make a list of names because I'm going to forget them if I don't. And just so you guys know, I do have a hard stop in 20 minutes. So we'll try to get this quickly here and move through some of these. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate you being here today on this live edition of the Node Investor. Remember to hit those likes, hit those subscribes. If you missed the beginning portion of this, I was talking portfolio strategy. I was talking Bitcoin dominance. So I would definitely go check that out if you did not catch the first half of this stream here. All right, so let's take a look at some of these names here. Let's go WAN chain. Let's do ICX. Let's do VeChain. Well, it's now VeChain 4. Let's go. Oh man, Ontology. That one was getting hit pretty good. A lot of these Net5 tokens were getting hit. Quantum. OMG here again on the BTC side. Lumens. We did Lumens already. Let's see here. Good question. How are you doing these alt trades? Going straight to BTC, then cash or profits? No, so that I was talking more like long-term hold. So if I have BTC in my current portfolio, which right now is like basically 80%, then I'm looking for potential moving some of that existing BTC out into some of these alts, even if it's only temporarily. And then when I quote unquote take profits, it's basically back to BTC. So the goal there is increasing the Satoshi values of the account. All right, let's see, BAT. Yeah, let's look at BAT because especially it being one of the Coinbase names. Bill Clinton is buying Ripple. Oh God. Let's see here. We did Litecoin already. Binance. Let's definitely take a look at Binance Coin. That's been one of the few showing some life here. We did Neo. Chainlink. Okay. 0x. Cool. Steam. I haven't looked at Steam in a while. Let's take a look at Steam. And Komodo. There's a name from yesteryear. All right, cool. Let me go through some of these names and then I'll come back and see what we got. Zill. Yeah, definitely Zilliqa. All right, so, all right, let me go to the top of the list here. We had WANchain. WANchain. Or WANchain. Big smackdown. You can see here the ICO debut or the exchange debut price was here, and obviously It tried to hold support and then just smacked down, rally attempt right into resistance, failed. And so far, it's just been stepping its way higher. But this is certainly starting to accelerate quite a bit. It is feeling absolutely washed out here. Even a counter trend rally would not be surprising, a good counter trend rally. So let me see here what we're looking at in terms of RSI on this guy. Let me open this up here real quick. And so this right now is at 25 on the RSI here. No divergence, unfortunately. I always like to see when it's making new low and the RSI is diverging. And you can see this was the low at 23 here, but you know, it's so far away in the past, it's not really as applicable anymore just because there's that much distance. But what I'd like to see is just a break of this trend here, this near-term trend, which would basically be a break of that declining 10 EMA. So that'd be the first signal, right? Because this is a very steep downtrend right now. So if it can break that first and maybe go sideways or have a strong bullish engulfing reversal type of pattern, that would be the first early signal that, hey, maybe this one's found a little bit of an intermediate low. You never know for sure, right? Because this was an attempt right here, right? This was an attempt right here, and it just breaks below. So you still got to maintain discipline in terms of where's the stop in case you're wrong type of action, because you just never know if that's the low. The alternative is you wait for kind of traditional patterns to form here, right? Like a double bottom type of action, and then you wait for actual confirmation and take it above the break of the neckline. So there's different ways to do that, but right now this is just kind of a straight drop, looking for some reversal. Not seeing it yet on WAN chain. What's the market cap on this guy? This is really dropped off. WAN chain. And $168 million from $1 billion. Quite the drop. Quite the drop on WAN chain. ICX. Looking at ICX here. And most of these charts, guys, are going to look real similar versus BTC. They just had this very dramatic drop here. But looking at ICX, this is another one that's on my radar right now. It's just so beaten up. 21 RSI here, but I'm looking for the same type of signal. There's no volume here. It would have been nice to see like big climactic selling volume and then a strong reversal. That's what I'm going to be looking for. Or this type of action back here where you saw kind of the big sell-off and then the big hammer reversal follow through on the next day. That's kind of what I'm looking for there. But paying attention to these now because I'm thinking we're getting close. Just waiting for the signals now. VeChain. So I'm going to show VeChain first because, as you guys know, they had the switch over. It's now VeChain Thor. But I posted this here before they swapped coins, and it was just it was going down climactic, right? It was just parabolic to the downside, and we did finally see a pretty decent bounce off of those lows here, going to VET, VeChain Thor. Now you can see we've had some pretty choppy action here. But this was the debut, and it was about a 20% pop or something off of this little formation here. So 28, 29%. So pretty decent little pop. Since then, kind of give you a little double top, and it's kind of pulling back here. Big selling yesterday, and so I'm a little cautious here. If it can get back above this neckline that it broke down from, right? You see a little bit of a double top right there. You get the breakdown. Huge volume on that break, by the way. So getting back above that neckline / 10 EMA on the 4-hour would be kind of my first requirement, if you will, and see if it can hold that reversal there on VeChain Thor. All right, Ontology, another name that got smacked pretty good here. Let me go to the daily chart first, and you can see I was looking at this one here. I like this here. This is actually putting a nice double bottom attempt right at a key price structure level, and so you can see back here, back in the early days, way back in April. You can see this was a base from which it broke out of and then gave you that nice run going into May. Fully retraced that move now, and it's trying to hold, I mean, almost to the penny. Let me see that. You can see the yellow line there. I mean, almost exactly touched it there. Go to the 4-hour chart. Nice attempt here on Ontology to form a little bit of a bottom finally, maybe. And so one to keep an eye on for sure. I'm going to highlight that here on my list here. So looking at Ontology, I'd like to see more volume coming in here. Right now, it's just attempting to bounce into the 10 EMA on the 4-hour. I really would like to see some more volume. If I see a bar looking like that, that'd be very positive. You're not going to get confirmation on a pattern like this until it actually closes above this level here. That's how it traditionally works. Double bottom, right? You get that first low, you get the second low, and then you get confirmation once you're above that. So that's what I'm going to be looking for. I don't always have to wait for confirmation. It depends on the reversal pattern, but the fact that it's here at the price structure support looks positive. Near term resistance is going to be the lows here. So around call it 3,800 or so, right above that. It's going to be your first resistance level to watch on ontology. Quantum. Let me go back to the daily here. Wow, quantum just really getting hammered here since May. And this one didn't even have that. It had that 1 day attempt, and this was when it was up 46% on that 1 day. I think that was when Binance announced USD trading for it, and then just never really did anything after that. It had a nice attempt here to form a big cup and handle, and then it just broke down. And a lot of that was market forces. BTC rolled over, everything rolled over, down 67% since May. And so are we done? We haven't seen any signs of it finding a bottom yet. It is certainly washed out. And man, RSI, look at, there was a bullish divergence on the RSI. Here's a good lesson. Bullish divergence on the RSI was forming. So it was setting up, but it never confirmed. And so I say that often, guys, that it's a good sign to look for that, but it's never a buy signal in and of itself, because if the price just rolls over, that's just going to totally negate it. And you see that here. So I was looking at a potential double bottom attempt here going into July. Nice divergence was showing up. It was setting up. Couldn't get above this resistance here. And you can see it just subsequently rolled over, gave you another leg down. And so back to the drawing board for this guy. But this RSI is very washed out here too. So at 16, wow, 16. That's it, guys. Alter dead. Alter never coming back ever again. Smash that like button, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, all of these alts look so beaten up. They really do. But I think they're getting close. I think they're getting close with BTC dominance rising, with the alts getting smashed. Might be looking at some good deals here. What other emails do you use besides the 10? That's a good question. Let me answer that here real quickly. I'm going to cover that a little bit more in depth here later on kind of another video for that. It depends on trading and longer term views. And so the quick answer is the 10 and the 26 WMA, right? So I use an exponential moving average for the shorter term time frames, and I use a weighted moving average for the longer term. So I use a 1026 EMA. You can use a 10 EMA, 26 WMA. You can use an EMA. But the point is, use a faster moving average. Don't use a simple moving average, because crypto just moves a little bit quicker here. So using an exponential or a weighted moving average is a little bit better for crypto. 1026 are kind of my two here from that perspective. If I'm trading, I like to use the 50 EMA, but just as a gauge for where prices are longer term, right? And so if something's below the 50 EMA, I mean, that's basically bearish, right? Trending lower. And if it's above, that's kind of a good confirmation to go long on some of these names. You can see there's the 50. And so those are the two biggies. I'm not a big believer in some of these others. I know some of you guys are, but you know, like the 200 and the 100 and some of that other stuff, I just don't follow it as much. Do they have some relevance? They absolutely do. People watch it. Just my time frames are a little bit smaller, and so I'm not looking at those longer term time frames. For me, the max would be a 50 EMA, and that'd be on the shorter time frame for trading, right? So I'd be looking at a 50 EMA on the 4-hour type of thing. And so, but the 10 is kind of my go-to, but you can do the 26 as well. All right, so OMG, just not finding any love here, continuing to drop, and RSI on this bad boy here is now hitting 21. And how far has this come down during May? OMG was looking so nice here too in April. May was just one of the leaders, breaking into new highs and down 60% since then. So unfortunate to see that in OMG. As you guys already know, I already pointed out the tether pair for this guy, and this did break down below a key support level here, breaking below a descending triangle. So not looking pretty from that perspective. All right. Who's next? We got BAT, BNB, Link. Got a hard stop in 6 minutes. I better speed this thing up. All right, so looking at this here, BAT is so choppy, man. I was really liking this one here, and it just gave me these two big wicks to the upside, and just it's just hard for me to enter something like that when it's just so choppy. You can see here on the 4-hour, just a lot of distribution as it gets rallied to the upside. And so I'm not liking this here personally. Just the setup is really choppy. It is one of the Coinbase names. Yes, it has, that news driving it, but you got a little bit of a big resistance forming right there. So that's going to be a major wall to clear. On the flip side, you do have some support, some rising highs. So if it makes a new high right here, that'll be positive, but it's got to hold this support here near term and start convincingly going back up again. So, but keep an eye on the upside. I mean, this would be a good breakout if it can clear that, but it's just got that big resistance here near term. Binance, one of the big names here recently, looking pretty good here. So let me clear this guy here. So Binance fully retraced the breakout, but dropped below to the next support level. You can see it. I've got it highlighted here with this dashed line. And you can see we came pretty close to that, almost exact, not quite. And since then, we've had a high, a big rally. We pulled back. We made a higher low. And here it is starting to confirm just today that it wants to set that higher low and start moving higher. So that's looking very positive. From the USD tether pair, this one did have a classic double bottom, also at key structure support. And so you can see we had a double bottom form right at this very important support level. And you can see where it hit this before, right there, right there, right there. And then here we go, double bottom, first bottom, second bottom. This was the neckline. We confirmed by breaking out. We're pulling back right now. To me, this feels just like a throwback following a double bottom breakout. And so if this holds, it's going to be a nice higher low, and I'm going to be looking for some more continuation on the upside for Binance. Now, how high does this go? Let's do a quick measured move on this double bottom target. I think that takes us to about 15 something. Let me go. Takes you to about 1570 is going to be the upside target. And then above that, of course, the next resistance is going to be this little double top that formed around $17. And so that's what I'm looking for on Binance. But Binance is one of the few names here showing some early signs of forming a low and showing some follow through here. So we'll see if it can continue. So Binance is looking pretty good here today. Link was showing some interesting action here the other day. Nice, again, another double bottom. And what I like about this here is you've got this new low, but you've got a slight divergence in the RSI. Not a huge one, but you do have a slight divergence in the RSI. And the RSI here is breaking into the 60 zone now, pulling back a little bit, but it did clear resistance. So that is very positive because now it's starting to switch the trend momentum, right? So you had this high, lower high right here, and then you had a lower low, but you didn't get a lower high, right? Had it paused right here and then just made a lower high and rolled over, right? Nothing to do. The fact that it cleared some resistance, made a higher high is positive. Right now, it's just pulling back to the 10 EMA. And so this could turn out to be a good secondary entry point on Link. And so I'm going to highlight this guy because Link is a project that's on my my list of potential names to add. And I like Link here, so I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. Looking pretty good. Let me see here, 0x. Time to short, maybe. 0x, still consolidating here a little bit versus the bigger term. One thing to watch here is as this chart narrows, right? That's what I'm going to be watching here. Near term, that's kind of a tighter trend line. What I'd really be watching is this trend line here. That'd be a little bit more appropriate, give it a little bit more room. And within that, it's kind of just consolidating. So support is going to basically be, this most recent low here, which now lines up to that trend line. Let me highlight that. It's going to be right there. So if it pulls back into this zone here around 1240, 12.4K or so, that's going to be interesting to see if we find some support and can we reverse above that. Above this, breaking into this trend line would be the next positive sign to look for. Until then, it's kind of just consolidating here, but it is one of the Coinbase names, and it is getting some extra attention because of that. And I think it being added to Coinbase would be positive for 0x there. All right, so looking at Steam, this is Steam on Binance, and it is breaking below the lows on Binance. I know Steam's been around longer than, what is this? Binance listed it in February. And so, but here on the Binance side, you can see breaking lower, not quite showing signs of bullishness yet, but potential low to be watching out here for. RSI is higher than it was on this most recent low here at the end of June. And so you're seeing some slight divergence there. Let's see if we can materialize a little bit of a double bottom. If you see another reversal like this, that'd be a really good sign, especially considering a double bottom. But on the upside, that low there is now resistance. And so any reversal attempts need to clear that first to start potentially turning the corner there on Steam. And that's the same with so many of these names, right? Look for the most recent low, the most recent higher low. And if you're trying to form a double bottom, unless it gets above that, you got to give it some time, because that's going to be major resistance. And so that's what I'm looking for there. And one more, ladies and gentlemen, we are at 10:30 my time. Quick live stream today, but I do need to run, unfortunately. But we will be doing more of these later. I'll probably do one later in the week, maybe Friday. We'll see how the market moves here. Yeah, so good question. RSI is relative strength, and I know I throw out a lot of these acronyms. Definitely check it out. If you're new to technical analysis, it is a very popular indicator that is used. There's different ways to use it, and for crypto, it needs to be adjusted, right? So the traditional 70-30, yeah, those are levels to look at, but for crypto, I take a little bit more of an extreme. Some people use 50 as kind of the zero line for the RSI. I don't. I mean, if it's above 50, that's okay, but I wanted it to get above 60 to confirm and below 40 to confirm. So there's different ways to do it. It's a momentum indicator, and it tends to signify price momentum. So it's a leading indicator, which is why I look at it, because if prices are going lower but RSI is not confirming, generally it's a sign to start paying attention. The sellers are losing momentum. So that's what I use it for. Definitely learn about it. RSI is important in terms of some trading. You don't need it for every setup, but some setups it absolutely helps. So here on Zilliqa, finally looking at this guy, the most recent low here is going to be resistance that we got to clear first on Zill. And so if we see a reversal, that level is going to be the must clear first before I start thinking maybe it's found a good low and it's going to start turning the trend. Until then, it's still making lower lows and lower highs. And so above that would be that level. And certainly getting above that would confirm that the trend of lower lows and lower highs is starting to turn. And so, but Zill is one on my radar too. Just doesn't look like it's done yet. And I mean, you can go down to the next, we're right at this base here. So that little zone is going to be the price point to be watching, which we're basically there. So it'll be interesting to see if it holds a low there. Over 70 RSI is overbought, not oversold. And technically, I don't give, I mean, for Bitcoin, maybe. For the alts, 70 is like, it's just getting started. And think about that here. Let me look at Zill. I mean, Zill hit 70 RSI here on this candle. And you could have said that was overbought. Subsequently went up 180% after that, right? So for big cap names, I think it matters. Most of the alts, it really doesn't. So I think the extremes got to be taken on the alts. I tend to look at like 80s and 20s, kind of and it depends on the time frame too. Absolutely, if you're doing daily charts, RSI won't hit as extreme generally as if you're hitting 1 hour charts or something like that. So, okay, cool. Well, guys, we covered a few names, not as many as we normally cover, but I did want to spend some time talking portfolio strategy, talking Bitcoin dominance, and all that fun stuff. I hope that helped. I will be doing more of that here. Let me go back to BTC. And so far, we're attempting to bounce here a little bit. It looks like that's all it was. We bounced right into that 10 EMA on the 1 hour. pulling back here a little bit. If we make a higher low above 76.60 or so, that'll be positive. If not, then you guys know where I'm looking at on the downside. Next level is going to be around that $7,500 to $7,600 mark or so as your first real big support level to be watching. And so that's going to be it. That's the level to be watching here over the next day or so. And appreciate everybody joining. Appreciate the likes. Remember, check out that information at nodeinvestor.com. And until next time, happy trading. Take care, everyone.